start to join. Oh, don't you love a nice recording in progress on a
But it's
Wednesday?
But it's not in progress, is it, Chris? It's not in progress.
It's in progress.
Progress.
It's always see, I quite like process as well. I think we should change from being process to process. It feels a bit more meaty to me. Don't you think so? Well, welcome everybody. Welcome Sue. Welcome Ephanie. Welcome Andy. Andy, welcome yourself. Andy with his glittery background.
And it's real, I say this every time we come on here. People always assume that it's a fake background, and it's not. It's actually a real wall. It's a glittery background, and the backstory is it used to be it was an office, and then it was a bedroom for a short period of time, and then my daughter commandeered it as a dressing room. But I quite liked it, so I thought actually now it's become my Zoom room. I think I'll probably keep the glittery wall. It adds a little bit of pizzazz to the evening, doesn't it? Not that we need any pizzazz added.
Rainforest, as you can tell.
Yeah. Is that an artificial background, Chris, or is that real?
Oh no, it's genuinely real. Look, you can tell as my hand disappears.
It doesn't look artificial at all. Those enormous blades of grass.
I could have done the one with the moon and do that as a homage to the two astronauts that returned yesterday.
It's a bit like, do you remember that film with Rick Moranis, Honey, I Shrunk the Kids?
Yeah.
Oh, I loved it.
Or it's just really tall grass.
It could be. It
could be in Amazonia. So, we get a minute. We'll give everyone else another minute or so to rock in.
Yes, I think one more minute and then we'll get cracking, which will be good. We've got quite a lot to get through this evening.
We have to be interested in attending.
Yeah, I don't know where people that are joining us are from which part of the country, but we're in South Hertfordshire and we had blue skies and sunshine today. I had a meeting this afternoon at our local hotel and I sat outside in the sunshine, which was
very
beautiful.
Nice indeed.
Yeah, it's lovely.
Ditto in Bournemouth, Andy. I've been in the sea this morning. Beautiful sunshine.
In the sea?
You are mad. I bet it was cold. Was it cold?
Wow, I bet that was fresh.
It was very fresh.
Okay, bonkers. Right, here we go, guys. It's 7:02, so I think we should start.
I think we'll get cracking. Right. So, welcome everybody. Tonight we have two guests. Those that are familiar with this format, Chris and I tend to host it. We always have guests, and tonight we have Sue and Ephanie from FJ Wealth. And the topic this evening is future-proof your life around the areas health and making a will to protect bloodline planning. So we're going to talk through health insurance, how to get the best coverage for your needs, which is a really important thing. And I'm guilty of this. When you're well, you tend not to give it much thought. And when you're not well, it really plays on your mind. So it surely makes sense to think about it when you're well. Estate planning, why a will is crucial, but also specifically in relation to bloodline planning, which is important. And this is all around future-proofing your legacy. So we'll hand over to Ephanie and Sue. They're going to talk for a bit. Chris and I are going to join in towards the end. If you have any questions, feel free to trot them into the Q&A and we can grab them at the end. And then we'll come back about 7:45, something like that. We'll have a chat and we'll make sure we're done by 8 o'clock.
Yeah, brilliant. Excellent. Right. I'm going to mute myself and disappear. Well, not actually disappear, but just...
So over to you, ladies. Thank you.
Lovely.
Thank you, guys.
Thanks for the introduction. I'm going to get my screen shared for everyone so you can follow along to the presentation today. And we can go through sort of looking at what Andy mentioned there, but I'm going to start off talking about the health insurance side of things. Now, this is something that I personally am really passionate about. And like Andy was saying, obviously, good health, when you've got it, you don't really think about it. But when your health isn't as good, it's such a priceless commodity. And unfortunately, it's not something any of us really have any control over. Now, I've been working in the health insurance industry now for over 7 years. It's something that I think is really important. I did a quick look before I logged on tonight, and at the moment there are 3.6 million people on an over 18-week waiting list with the NHS, and almost about 200,000 who have been waiting over a year to see someone on the NHS. And the thing is, the NHS is a fantastic service, but it's overloaded at the moment. And it's not something that we can really afford to wait with. Whether you're a business owner or working full-time as a dentist or a pharmacist, you haven't really got the time to be sick. I know myself, I spent a few months sick last summer, and it's not what I wanted at all. And actually getting to see someone about that is so important. And when you have to wait to see a specialist or wait to have a procedure, it just means your life gets put on hold. And that means probably your business is going to get put on hold as well. So the best option is to actually have health insurance so that then you can decide where you have the procedure done. And when you have it done, you might think, actually, this time of year is my busiest time of year. Medically, I can wait. I want to wait until the summer when it quietens down for me. Or you might think, I need it straight away. So you get it done straight away. But it's something that gives you that option to choose. And it really is such a beautiful piece of protection because it allows you to take back that control, because none of us want to be sick and it's out of our control. But by having this health insurance and managing your health, it takes back that control. And as well as that, the health insurance providers want you to work on your well-being as well. And it's so much better that none of us get sick and we just are healthy. And they do a lot of different approaches to that, whether it be a digital kind of GP to speak to people, just so you can talk about those little niggles. Maybe you don't have time to actually get down to your GP surgery to talk about. They've also got things like dietitian appointments, nutritionists. You can go and see the physio. Things that actually, if we do maintenance programs, it keeps us healthy rather than waiting until, oh, something's major has happened here and now I've got to be off work for 3 months. So there's so many different aspects of health insurance, and whether you've got cover or whether you've not put it in place, it's really important to be speaking to people to make sure your health insurance is working for you. If you haven't got it, make sure you can get the right one in place. So I'd be happy to chat that through with you at a later date. But I think what we're going to do later on in the call is just kind of, Sue and I are going to speak to each other and explain what exactly is important when it comes to health insurance and where you can go to find the solutions. But I'll let Sue introduce her side of things now. I'll just switch over the slides for you.
Oh, thank you, Eponine. Yeah, we're going to talk a lot more about private medical together because I personally have some anecdotes to share with you, which I think you'll all be able to identify with. But in the meantime, I want to introduce myself. I'm Sue Delahunty, and I'm one of the directors here at FTA Wealth. And you can see that I'm not a spring chicken. So I'm kind of in charge now of all the, if you call it, kind of end of life stuff, like planning your estate, making a will, and looking after perhaps what happens if you're taken ill or you have an accident and someone needs to manage your financial affairs by way of a lasting power of attorney. So let's talk about wills and why wills are so important and so crucial. And I mentioned the word bloodline. By bloodline, I mean your own natural or adopted children or children's children, or even their children, because we all live so long now that we're possibly likely to see into our great-grandchildren. And you want the money that you have worked so hard for to go down the bloodline ordinarily. And what people sometimes say to me is, I don't want it to go to my daughter's partner if they divorce, or I don't want it to go to my daughter's partner because I don't like him or her if it's a son. So there's lots of things a will can do that are very, very subtle, very discreet, that no one in the family needs to know about until you pass away, but that are very, very protective of your hard-earned assets and make sure that they stay within the family, if that's what you want. Now, of course, we sometimes get people where the family is not to inherit the assets. That's even more important, that the will is properly and correctly drafted, because if you don't have a will, I can tell you now, you have no choice about where your money will go. It will go to a husband or a wife if there is one. to children if they exist, and that's equally amongst your children, whether that's what you want or don't want. And if there are no children, it'll go up the line. So mother, father, on both sides. And that may or may not be what you want, but certainly my children won't want to leave me their money because I'm at the end of my life rather than the beginning. And if I inherit it, all I've got to do then is hand it right back down again to someone else in the next generation. So a drafted correctly will is so important for us. Did you know that 50% of you watching me tonight, or even more actually with you busy dentists and pharmacists, probably don't even have a will? Don't be ashamed to tell me that, because you're in extremely good company. And I'm always very surprised that people can rest in their beds, because wills can do things, for example, like put your mind at rest as to what would happen if mother, father of young children were both killed in a car crash, or became ill, or died, or one died, then the other died, and the children were left orphaned. Now, the one very important thing you've got to think about is who would bring my children up in the way that I would like them to be brought up morally, and obviously financially. And the will can make all of those plans. We can go into a lot more detail with the wills that we write. For example, because we're a wealth company, it won't necessarily be me that does the entire job, but my son Adam is the MD here in the company. And if you've got inheritance tax liabilities, and most of us actually do have, if you've got over £1 million in total across your properties, your business, and your other assets, you're likely to pay inheritance tax when you pass away, or your family will have to pay it actually, because you'll be gone. You won't know a darn thing about it. But if you want to make some plans for how to mitigate or minimize that inheritance tax, there is some very simple ways that we as a company can help you. But a properly crafted will can protect against other things, such as what I call financial predators. And they're things like the care fees that you might have heard older people complain about. What happens if I need care? Will they take my house? Do I have to sell my house to pay for the care? Possibly yes, but there are ways of us, if we get in early while you're still both with us, we can make some plans to protect at least half of your estate, if not all of it. So there's many things we can do that are not they're not sort of onerous in terms of how you pass money to your family, but they protect against predators such as care fees or divorce. Divorce is a killer when it comes to wills. For example, if you're passing away, you pass away, your daughter or your son is going through a very messy divorce at the time that you pass, then their inheritance will be taken into account in the divorce settlement. But I can easily help you with that by ring fencing any of the money you leave behind into some sort of family arrangement that can come into play on the date of death. So nothing happens while you're alive. I want you to understand that any word such as trust doesn't mean you handing over your precious assets while you still wish to use them. Of course, when you get older, really old, you can give your assets away. That's about the safest way to do it. But I would not be recommending that to anyone below the age of 75, because the life expectancy could be quite long now, and you might need to use your own money. And your children might not actually necessarily need your inheritance. It might be better placed going to their children, the next generation. So those are the things that trusts can do. Now, I've got some good news for you if you are a business owner, and that is that your business assets qualify for some very exciting tax treatment. Now, I know this government are marching stealthily on all of these sorts of allowances. No doubt you've seen the farmers complaining about agricultural property relief being reduced. Business property relief still exists, and you, if you own your own business, if you have a pharmacy shop or you have a dental practice, will qualify for business property relief. I can make sure that that property relief isn't just available to you, but is available to the next generation. The example I just gave you of your own children not wanting to necessarily draw down your inheritance. If your business assets were put into a business-related trust, your grandchildren could benefit from that, and the business assets would still qualify for that relief that I've described. The other thing wills can do is make things clear to the people left behind, because the saddest moment is when you lose your parents and you don't know whether your mum or your dad wanted to be cremated or buried, or where do they want to be scattered, or where would they like to be, you know, to choose a plot, or what type of funeral would they like? Are they completely wanting the simplest of ceremonies with absolutely no fuss, or would they like us all to be grieving, wearing black and looking quite miserable? Funerals can literally range from now private cremation ceremonies to the biggest party you've ever seen. I went to a funeral myself recently in Bristol, and it was my uncle, who was a very big Bristol City fan. So there was 150 football supporters there to start with. He also was part of what's called the Barmy Army, which was the rugby followers for the England rugby team. So they were all there too. Now, opposite us was another funeral going on at the same time, which was a Rastafarian funeral, where they were all singing absolutely wonderful gospel songs. And then next to that was a gypsy funeral, where they were dancing and screaming. So you can see what I mean about those wishes need to be explained to your family. Things like organ donation. Very important that you share your thoughts and your views about this with your family. Other things that we can do that are a little bit more out there. If any of you have got, sadly, like myself, I have a disabled grandson who will never be able to look after himself, unfortunately. And having a disabled person's trust in the will mean that if we leave money to him, it will not be touched by the benefit authorities if he needs support in the future. So anything like that that's very specific, I'd be able to give you help on. But being the word trust, do not be misled into thinking I'm giving my assets away. Anything I give advice on in my session will relate only to the day that you pass away. Okay, so I'm going to get time to talk about that and the lasting powers of attorney in detail. Now, just briefly explaining what a lasting power of attorney can do. This is probably even more important than your will, and it's probably something you've never thought about doing. You could, in fact, do one just for your business. And if you did that, then you'd make me a happy person, because at least I'd know you were protected. But if anything happened to you, you got COVID and you were knocked out for 6 months, or you had a car accident, or you had a serious illness like cancer and you needed treatment that rendered you so frail that you couldn't make financial decisions, you would have pre-appointed someone to act as your attorney or attorneys. That could be your wife, your husband, or it could be your children, or it could be business associates if it's a business-related asset we want to protect. And in fact, those documents are so powerful, and they are monitored by the Office of the Public Guardian. Martin Lewis, the TV expert, did a whole program on this. You could probably pick it up on Catch Up. It was on a week ago, and it explained that you can write your own lasting power of attorney if you can be bothered, but there's 15 different areas where you could make a mistake, and the power of attorney would be rendered useless. Now, I charge for my time, but I give you a hell of a service. What we do is we take your details, we create the document, we check the document, we send the document off to the attorneys, we check their signatures, their witnessing, make sure all the dates add up. We then register your document with the Office of the Public Guardian so it could be used immediately. Do you know that you would wait 5 months to register such a document at the moment, which is appalling. Ever since we all went to work at home and the Office of the Public Guardian, being a public body, sent all their staff home, when you ring them to talk to them, you can hear the cats, the dogs, the babies crying in the background, and they're 5 months behind. So I don't want to make a fuss about that, but you need to pre-register your document so it's ready to go. Lots to talk about, but I think the best way of bringing out the sort of frequently asked questions would be with our wealth of experience, and I've been in the industry 47 years, and there's nothing I haven't seen, nothing as peculiar as folk. I've seen people who don't want to include their children in their will. I've seen people who don't want to include their wife or husband in their will, all sorts of funny things. But what we are going to do now is we're going to share with you the sort of questions that our clients ask us in a way that you'll feel familiar with your own interests and what is motivating you to seek advice on these two subjects.
So I'm going to stop sharing the screen for now so you can see us both a bit better. We'll come back with our contact details towards the end of the webinar. But like Sue said, I think it's really good to kind of go through it in a bit more of a real life situation. So we'll start with the private medical insurance, Sue.
Yes, and the timing couldn't be more right, because Andy and Chris know this, but I have just had a knee replacement done. And luckily for me, I was able to choose the time that I had it done. But what I didn't factor in was I fell down on day one. The day I went home away from the hospital, I fell down and broke my wrist. So now here I am needing 2 lots of physiotherapy to get me back up and running. And luckily for me, I can choose which physio I use, what time I go. So I have not interrupted my work at all, despite the fact that I had plaster from the fingers to the elbow. I just dictated everything. I sat on a chair with my leg in the air and dictated. But this was all because I had the freedom to choose who I saw, which surgeon did the operation, and how quickly I was dealt with, and also the aftercare. Because a lot of the products that Eponine will specialize in talking to you about will give you all these other optional extras. Now, I'm going to run through some questions that we get asked on a regular basis. So, Eponine, I haven't ever taken out private medical before. I just want to know if it's worthwhile.
Yeah,
what would you
of course.
say to
So
that?
it's definitely worthwhile. I think, especially like I said at the beginning of the presentation, with the situation with the NHS at the moment, it's not that they don't provide a good service, they just are overworked, and we are all so short in time.
Yeah.
And there's no good way of dealing with bad health, but there's better ways, and that's getting, like you say, to be seen when you want to get seen, by who you'd like to see, in which hospital you want to see, because it gives you that flexibility and freedom. And I think now more than ever, private medical insurance is needed. A lot of our clients use it hand in hand with the NHS. When they can get the help they need, they go with the NHS. When they can't, they don't have to sit and wait. They can just go and see someone and get the help they need right away. So definitely worthwhile.
I mean, that's very interesting, Eponine, because I think that sums up, if you have a heart attack and you are pretty much close to death, then NHS will deal with you immediately.
999.
Yeah. But I think what we're talking about here as business people and as owners of businesses, yourselves watching, you don't really want that downtime. And I've just illustrated to you, you don't know what's going to happen. I was not expecting to lose the whole use of one side. And it has given me a bit of a shock, even with the support that I've had. It's been quite a difficult and uphill battle. But, you know, I'm about to have the second knee done now. And I feel very confident, having gone through that process, that the support is there for me to use. So, you know, I would say absolutely worthwhile myself. So can I get cover for my family? Because I've got young children. A lot of our clients do. How would that work?
So there's a number of different ways the policies can be structured. You can get personal cover.
Okay.
You can get it for your family. You can even cover your employees in your business as well, if there's any key employees you have, and you wouldn't want them having the downtime out of work. So that's an option as well.
That's really interesting. And you're talking about possibly someone like the practice manager, or someone that was very key and fundamental to the business. I've got that. Okay, so it's flexible. Now, you mentioned the employees, but what about paying for this? Can I pay for this? Can I do this in a tax efficient way through the business?
Yes, you can. So as a business owner, quite often the most cost effective And definitely the most tax efficient way of setting up the cover is to put the cover through your business. Now,
Right.
what we find a lot of people do is you can have categories with business health insurance. So they have category 1, which is the top cover, and they cover themselves, the other business owners, and their families. So that's partners and children, dependent children, so normally up to the age of 25. And then they have category 2, which is sort of your more emergency cover, I'd say. And they offer that to their employees. It's on a cheaper rate, but it
Right.
means that their employees get a bit benefit and they get cost efficient health insurance for their families as well.
That's really interesting. And how big a group are we talking about? Is there a minimum number?
Nope. So even if you are one person,
Wow,
you don't have any partner, you don't have any kids, you can still put it through your business.
that's very good. to know.
Obviously, the bigger the policy, the more beneficial the rates are, the more people you have, the cheaper it is per person. But that doesn't stop you setting it up as a 1-man or a 2-man group scheme. A lot of our clients do that, especially when they're starting up their practice, because at that crucial time, they can't afford to be off work sick.
And I think it's important to note that I work with Eponine, but she is the specialist on private medical. It isn't my speciality. However, I have noted in the 40 odd years that I've done the job of being an IFA, that more and more people class this as a necessity rather than a luxury. And many more people have it that we talk to. But one of the things that Eponine will do is to shop around for the very best solution. We are completely and utterly independent. We're not tied to any company. So when you are with a particular company, Vitality or Bupa or whatever, you will probably be tied into that yourself and maybe not even think about looking at that. We would suggest strongly that you review that on a regular basis because the rates do change. So one thing I wanted to check is about private hospitals. Now, where I am, Eponine, I'm very lucky. There are 3 or 4 really good private hospitals, but it's not the same where my partner is down in Devon. There's only one, and he would only want to go to that one. How does that work? How do I choose a private hospital sort of plan?
So there's a lot of different options. Now, if someone hasn't had health insurance before, what I would recommend to them is they have a form of guided option.
Okay.
Now, this is something that I feel quite passionately about. I think it's a fantastic option from the insurers. So what they do is they take a look at your condition. So let's say a knee replacement.
Yeah. Bit
Now,
painful.
a
Yeah,
bit
yeah.
painful,
But
as you know. Now, they would look at that and they'd look at your area and they would look at the 3 or 4 best consultants in your area
right, okay.
for that particular procedure. Now, it might be that 2 are in the same hospital, one's in another hospital. And let's say you're looking at the list, they all seem to have about the same reviews. So you think, actually, it's going to be easier for me to get to Southampton than it is to get to Bournemouth. I would like to go to Southampton to have this. And you'll have one of those options. Or if you were diagnosed with a really niche specific condition, 1 in 20 people in the country to have it, they would send you to
Further
the
away.
top London hospital for that one specialist who deals with this. But it would be guiding you to the best specialist for that condition.
Got it.
Or you can go on a hospital list. What that means is you have to go and research which consultant you want to see at that hospital, which, if we're honest, when you're sick, you don't want to be reading through all these notes, do you?
Yeah,
But
yeah.
both options are available, and it really does depend on what each person prefers.
And if you could tell me, you know, what sort of things, I mean, you deal with dentists and pharmacists every day who've got this sort of cover. What sort of things are covered? What sort of things do they claim on? What's happening out there with regular claims and what people want?
So you've got your sort of core cover with any health insurance, and this is any inpatient and day patient procedures, and then also cancer cover.
Right.
Now, cancer is still one of the more highly claimed on
Really?
pieces of health insurance. Yeah. And although a lot of people like the NHS service, what they want when they got cancer is their own private room. in a hospital that they feel comfortable in, where they know they're going to get a bed and everything like that, and they're going to get the support they're looking for. So that's kind of the core cover. And then you've got your outpatient cover, so your consultants' fees, your diagnostics tests. But then we get in the bit more exciting stuff. So your therapies cover going to see a physiotherapy, acupuncturist, chiropodist, osteopath, sort of the maintenance procedures. And you've got mental health cover, so there's a lot of like talking therapies, phone lines and things like that.
Well, I can absolutely attest to that, because the knee replacement, as it was planned and went through private hospital, the physio has been fantastic. I can choose my own physio. I can go to one that's nearest to my home, and I've chosen this sports physio because I do a lot of sport, and it's been absolutely wonderful. My wrist that broke, I went to the NHS. I went to A&E.
Right.
And I've got a physio. I had one physio appointment, just one, with the NHS, and that is it. And that, believe it or not, isn't for 3 weeks. And I broke my wrist 8-9 weeks ago. So I can see the difference, and I can see how pressed they are. The literally, if you don't get in at 9 o'clock in the morning, the queues are enormous. It's horrific. So I totally get where you're coming from. And okay, so tell me, if I did unfortunately need to claim, what does a claim look like? How do I make a claim?
Of course. So the best way is with every health insurance policy, whether you take it out personally or you take it out through your business, you're going to get your own digital GP with that health insurance provider. Now, you can either go to your NHS GP, but obviously they're only normally open in the week, and they're normally only open between 9 and 5. So I would say the first point of call is to contact your digital GP. Now, they might say, actually, I think you need to see someone in person for this, but you could book that at 9 o'clock at night if you were worried. So that's step one, see the digital GP. If it's something minor, that Vitality or AXA or Aviva or Bupa GP might be able to refer you for some physio or something minor like that. If they say you need to go for further investigations, they'd say, right, we need to open up a claim for you. So they'd open up the claim, it would go with the claims team. Depending on your underwriting, they might need to just get a GP report to check that it's not something you've had before. Once you've got that, you'd be seeing someone, and they'd call you up and say, when do you want to book in? Do you want to do this week or next week? And if you wanted to wait a month, you could, but it's normally within a week or two that you get booked in to see someone.
And this digital GP, this is an interesting one, because at my age, I did say, when Eponine explained the policy to me and got me sorted, I said, I've not really bought into this digital GP lark. I like to see a person, but in actual fact, the benefit of them, as you say, is the speed. And we're all doing so much now on video call, and it was a video call to the GP. So it does really work, and they do know their stuff. They are very, very highly, sort of qualified people. So, yeah, I think that's, you've won me over on that, because I was a bit, what on earth she's talking about.
It's just the reassurance, isn't it? For myself, I had a mole that I was feeling a bit unsure about, but I didn't have time to go in and see the GP. I wasn't that concerned about it. So I just called the digital GP. I did it in my lunch break. They said, send us in some pictures. I sent them in some pictures. They said, that's nothing to worry about, Eponine. Turns out I was just being a bit of a hypochondriac, but it's better to get it checked. So by the afternoon, my mind was at rest.
Now, I'm conscious of time, so I've got one more question for you, Eponine, if that's okay.
Of course.
And that is that I've got friends who've got private medical, and I've got friends who haven't. And we talk, because obviously we're getting older, so we talk about health quite a lot. And basically, what happens with reviewing these policies? They've been with the same company. Do they get loyalty discounts? Is it still worth their while coming to you for a comparison?
Definitely worth coming for a comparison. So there's 3 main things I find when doing someone's review. So that is actually your policy's out of date. So the cover levels that were being sold 10, 15 years ago are often quite outdated. They did very limited cover levels. because health insurance was still building as a market, and it wasn't quite as an aggressive market, whereas now the
Very
health
competitive,
insurance
isn't it?
providers are trying to get
Yeah.
the best service for their clients, which is fantastic for me because they're pushing to get better service levels. But it means that if you've had a policy for a while, it might be worth just me having a read through and going, actually, that's something where you're getting very minimal cover, whereas on a basic health insurance, a new policy, you'd get that covered in full. So that's sort of one thing to look at. The second thing is personal situations change all the time. I was speaking to a client just last week, and she wanted to go for quite a cheap option when she set it up. So she put an outpatient limit on her policy. Now, she set her policy up 20 years ago. She's now in her 70s, and she's claiming a lot. She's using a lot of outpatient fees. And the problem is she's paying about £3,000 to £4,000 a year on outpatient fees because she put a limit on her policy. And I said to her, have you ever thought of increasing it to full outpatient cover so there is no limit? Because it will probably be cheaper than you paying out of your own pocket.
Yeah.
No one had ever told her that.
Well, no one is going to tell her. It's a bit like with Sky, isn't it? When you've got your Sky contract, they don't come back and tell you that you could do it cheaper. Eponine, that is wonderful. Thank you very much. Do you mind coming to me with the sorts of questions that people ask us regarding wills? And then if anybody's got any questions later regarding what Eponine and I have talked about so far, you will get the opportunity to ask. But let's talk about wills now.
Of course. So because I am quite young and I've not yet got round to it, what would actually happen if I died without a will? So,
well, I did sort of allude to this. So, Eponine, I don't know your full family situation, but if you're married, aren't you?
yeah.
Okay, so if you're married, it will all go to your husband without a will. Okay. Now, I'm not going to say whether that's a good thing in Eponine's case because that's far too political. But if that's what you want, then that's great. But what it would do is it would slow things down for your husband, Dan.
Okay.
It would make it very, very difficult for him to administer. It's much better for you to make the simplest of simple wills. You don't need any trusts at the moment. You've got, nothing to worry about. I know that, you're planning to buy property and things like that in a bigger way in the future. And I'll be able to give you more advice, but everybody needs a will. Otherwise, you just have no control over where it goes. Now, if you and Dan are killed in a car crash, which I sincerely hope you're not, but if you are, then we did talk about your parents just before we started this seminar. And they're getting on a bit. Whether you'd want them to get your share of the estate, I don't know. There may be some younger people that are more deserving in your family. So that's one of the reasons why a lady in your position who hasn't seemed to have that many responsibilities still needs a will.
Yeah, of course. And obviously, looking towards the future, if I wanted to start a family, how could I make sure my children were looked after if anything happened to me?
Well, I mentioned the guardians. Now, this is what we call the person who's got the moral control of your children, and picking somebody to look after the children is very, very important. Somebody that you would feel comfortable would bring the children up in the way that you would like to do so. You might all remember a really horrible case in the news of where a dentist was actually murdered in France. And it was very sad. The two children were in the car. One of them escaped from the car and was found hiding nearby. The other one was found in the car. I won't dwell on that awful case, but what I will say to you is I do know that those children were made wards of social services for 18 months before the family were able to take those children back into the family, because there was absolutely no will in place and the children were taken away from their grandma, granddad. It's just not legal to go along and say, my daughter's died, I want her children. It may be that you don't get to look after the children and they get taken into social services care. So it's very important you appoint guardians. They don't have to have control of the money. They can be someone different, or they could be the same individual.
Right, okay. Now, I've heard you, when speaking to our clients, you talk about who should be the executor.
Yeah, good point.
How do we know who to choose?
Oh, very, very good point. I mean, some people do pick some very interesting people to be executors. So first of all, you would pick, if you're a married couple, often each other to be executor of the other's will. And executor is a person who does the administration. So they bring everything together and then they distribute it. And then there's another role that goes alongside the executor, and that's trustee. So if any of those trusts I said about earlier, for example, protecting the property, protecting against divorce, looking after a disabled individual, trying to protect the business assets from taxation, things like that, then you would have trustees, and you can have different trustees for different trusts if you want, or you can have one person doing everything. And the trustee can be the executor. At all times with a trust, you're going to need two people. So if you appoint each other, you're going to need to appoint someone else in the family. I often say it's someone who doesn't mind a bit of admin.
Yeah.
You can pay them. You can
Oh.
choose a professional if there's no one in your family that is capable of doing it. But I must warn you that there's a lot of money made in probate.
Okay.
Will writers like me don't make all the money. It's the probate solicitor that makes the money. It's a percentage of the estate. So if I can keep that away from the probate solicitor, more in your family's hands, then I will do that for you.
Yeah, of course. Now, thinking again to the future a bit here, obviously, if we do have a family, Dan and I, if anything were to happen to us both, I know what Dan's like with money. Not good is the best way of putting it. And I would be worried our children would perhaps take the same view on money.
A chip
So-
off the old block, in other words. Okay.
Make sure that they didn't spend all their inheritance at once.
That's a really good point. Now, when I started to write wills, was about 20 years ago. I've done the job of IFA for longer, but I decided to write my own wills rather than pass them out to someone else, because nearly everybody I saw needed my advice. So I started by asking people, what age do you think your children would appropriately be able to inherit? And they were all 18 or 21. Let me tell you now, it's far more common for me to do 25 to 30. And I even have older than that. I think I'm a mother of young men, and I think men, I shouldn't say this, but children don't necessarily get those skills until maybe into their 20s, probably when they finish their education. So what you can do is leave the money in the family trust. And the benefit of doing that is if they get into the wrong company, they get into drugs or drink, or they marry somebody unsuitable, we can keep the money away from those unsuitable partners and those unsuitable friends and influences. So we can pop that money away for as long as you want it to, but you have to be reasonable. I mean, I don't put money away for people to have on their 60th birthday because it would seem a little bit unfair. But normally 25, 30, 35.
Yeah, that's really reassuring. Yeah. And do my business assets have any tax benefits at all?
Well, most definitely, yes. And this is, while the government haven't actually taken this benefit away from business owners, I cannot guarantee this will carry on forever. But if your will is written and the will, it has the trust within, it will be able to benefit from current arrangements. Now, I can't guarantee what will happen in the future, but certainly business assets should be ring fenced if you intend holding the business for a number of years. If you're just about to sell your business, please tell me, because I may save you a few £100s on making your will. Making a will without trust is really very, very, very inexpensive. But if we add a few trusts, they're normally a few £100s. And therefore, I can save you that by saying you don't need a business trust. You're just about to sell those business assets and they're turning into cash. So, just keep me informed as to what's happening in your life.
And I know you touched on it a bit earlier, but how can I make sure that my assets would only go to my bloodline and not any of the financial predators you mentioned, like care fees or through divorce or things like that?
Okay, so the divorce would be settled by the way I've described, putting it into a family trust, because a family trust will deal with just the family, and the family is bloodline, so someone that's your blood relative, i.e. your natural born child, or in fact adopted children. It sadly doesn't include stepchildren, and we all know that many combined and sort of blended families exist these days. Now, you can write your stepchildren into the will, but it's by choice rather than default. So we can put people who are non-bloodline, because my children were with their stepdad from very young, so there is a very strong connection there. And basically you can write the child in, but bloodline means the people you choose to be your bloodline. Now, those husbands and wives have absolutely no rights whatsoever. The only time that that becomes a problem is if there's a divorce going on at the time of inheritance, because the divorcee's assets become part of the overall divorce settlement. And I have seen people's inheritances just literally go. So I would say a family trust for a family is normally appropriate. Occasionally it's not, but it's normally appropriate. Not necessarily if you don't have children, but for your own children and adopted children, definitely yes. Now, the property is different. If you want me to protect the property from these long-term care fees, very clever. It's called a property protective trust. All it does is change the way that you own the property from joint tenancy, which we've all got if we've bought a property together, to tenancy in common. Tenancy in common means that we kind of own, if I slice a house in half a house each, and our half on our death, say I die first and I leave a husband with his share alive, my share goes into a little pot that's ring fenced for my children, but my husband can live there, he can sell it, he can upscale, he can downscale, he can even take income from the property if it's rented out, but it doesn't belong to him on my death. It belongs to my children. Now, this protects against my husband going off and marrying a Thai girl in the future, because my house still goes to my kids. So divorce again, or remarriage, I should say, big thing. If you have a situation where you two split up and Dan remarries somebody else, they won't get your share of the house.
Okay.
It'll be ring fence for your kids.
No, that's really good. And one thing I would say, and I think this comes up a lot, doesn't it? Couldn't I just draft my own will and save some money?
You can. You can draft your own will. You can even draft your own LPA. Thankfully, Martin Lewis made it clear to the public how difficult it would be. Drafting your own very simple will, if there's just you and you're on your own and there's no kids and you don't have much money, you don't have any business assets and you don't have a house, I would say not bad. You could do it yourself using a kit that you can buy online, or just write it and get it witnessed. Now, so many wills fail because they have not been done correctly. Even using the same ink and proving that the witnesses are in the same room at the same time will render a will useless. Now, for a couple of £100, which is, we charge £250, we give a discount for our existing clients, so we even bring it down from that for a single will. It literally is such an investment in your future. If you want to put some trust, it will be more than that. But if you were doing the simple will and you wanted to do it yourself, I would say, please just take the advice of an expert. I've seen so many wills become completely invalid. One of the things that renders a will invalid is remarriage. So people don't realize they make a will, the husband or wife dies, and then they remarry. The will is no longer valid. So getting married again and getting divorced, you need a new will. So if you haven't made one since you divorced, please talk to someone like me. I specialize in advising people who have businesses because there is other things that they can do. But, you know, I don't mind if you haven't got a business, you still need a really good will.
And just from hearing the conversations that you have with people, I think when you start actually discussing the topic, there's so many things you haven't thought of.
Absolutely.
That actually you do want to express.
Yeah.
While you were talking, I was just thinking, oh, but actually I'd probably like to leave some to my nieces if anything happened to me now, which wouldn't automatically happen if I was to die without a will. So
yeah,
it really is a topic that there's a lot more to it than we think.
And I will guide you, but I won't make your mind up for you because I'm taking your instructions. But for example, when you appoint your executors, you know, I mean, I'm 68, so I don't want to be appointing people of my age group as my executors. I need to be appointing people who are younger than me because we're all going to drop off our perch, you know. So basically, you need to think about some succession planning in your will. And people write these wills and then they say, oh, it was my dad who was my executor, but he's gone. What good is that? You know, who's going to be the executor now? You haven't got a reserve. So we can do all of that. We can put reserves in. So if somebody does die, then there's someone else. So there's lots and lots of things for as I say, the small amount of money that it would cost you to do the simplest of wills don't write your own. There's one other way you could write a will yourself, and that's by donating to charity. That some of the charities will do a free will for you, but that's a bit of a con because they want the money into the charity. But that will be a properly constructed will. So that's advice. If money's an object and you don't want to pay, that's probably the best way of doing it.
Okay, that's good to know.
Thank you.
Now, do you think we have time for one more question? Yeah.
Yeah, I think if we talk about lasting powers of
Yeah.
attorney, I think that's probably the only other subject that I think we need to just give you one more our view on. And I mean, Eponine, with respect, actually has written wills, so she's got that expertise as well. She's just too busy doing private medical at the moment to have even any time to help me. But lasting powers of attorney are very important. People think of them as something that they do for their mum when she's getting on a bit, and then they want to look after the money, you know, between them and their sister or their brother or whatever. But in actual fact, young people need lasting powers of attorney too, especially if they're running a business. I'll give you an example of why. If your business is subject to an uncompleted purchase, uncompleted sale, and you get ill and you are unable to act through either a medical accident or a condition or a virus or something else, mental breakdown, then basically the whole deal goes into a black hole. And people say, well, my wife can sign for me. No, she can't. Well, my husband can sign for me. Absolutely not. You need to appoint them as your attorney for this to be legal. So in a business, if you're a business owner and you haven't got a lasting power of attorney, then you're missing a trick. Good news, I can put that advice through your company because it is conducive to the company, the lasting power of attorney. The wills, I'm afraid, you'll have to pay for through your own bank account.
That's
Thank
really
you.
good to know. What I'm going to do then, Sue, at this point, if that's okay, I'm going to reshare our screen and just pop our contact details up there, just so that if anyone wants to get in touch about any of
Yes,
these
thank you.
subjects, then it's worthwhile, isn't it? Because we, like it says on the screen, we offer a free, no obligation
Absolutely.
consultation. And it's sometimes just nice to have that conversation with someone to make sure you are on the right tracks, isn't it?
I agree with that. Totally. Yes, completely free. We're quite happy to share ideas with you. And if you want to come back and use us, then please do. But you're under no obligation for that first call.
I'm just having a look as well. I do believe there's been a question. I'm just getting it up on my screen. Bear with me one moment.
Oh, there's Andy waiting.
Thank you, ladies. That was really good. Let me do the question for you, Eponine, and then between you and Sue, you can answer it. So the question we have is, I've heard some consultants don't see private health insurance patients. When my mum needed treatment, they would only see her on a self-funded basis.
So it depends on how the health insurance is actually set up. When it comes to obviously how it's set up, if you've got a hospital list, you will be given a list of consultants who are covered under that hospital. Now, the reason why some consultants aren't covered is because they've not hit the standard that the health insurers would accept. So they run through rigorous testing when it comes to the consultants, and they try and make sure that all their results are where they should be. So in some instances, if there's a particular consultant you like to see and they've been, for whatever reason it might be, removed from the health insurance providers list, it's usually because there's normally reviews and reasons behind it. And in that case, there would be self-funding. But what's normally best is to speak to the health insurance provider first to find out if that consultant is covered. So that you're not in the situation where you've gone to see someone to then find out that they're not covered. It's always best to get in contact first, find out if that person is covered, and if they're not, why they've not.
Why are they not?
Yeah.
Yeah.
So that you can make sure you get the best option.
Brilliant. Thank you for that. Just rolling back to the point that you made, Sue, about people not having wills, and it's kind of it's more an emotional question. Why is it as people we struggle to make a will? Because we all know the importance of it. We all know by virtue of just being living creatures, we are going to expire at some point. So why is it that people really struggle to get a will sorted? Because it's kind of, once it's done, it's done. And I know you need to update it, but updating things is always easier than doing it first time round. But do you know why there's this barrier
Yeah.
for people to know it's good for us, but not get over that hurdle and actually do it? You said nearly half of people don't have a will. It's a staggering number.
I think it's over that. I think in the dental industry and the people that we see in the pharmacies and things, I think first of all they're really busy, so they probably don't get round to it often. They say I'm going to do it. I've been meaning to do this for years and I haven't got round to it. But I think you've actually hit a bit of a raw nerve there, Andy, which is that Eponine hears me doing the calls and meeting people, and some of the questions are quite emotional. So I'll give you an example of the sort of thing you've got to ask a client is, what would happen if your children die before you do? And who wants to think like that? You know, no, they say you never get over the death of a child because the order that you should die in is not that way around. So I get to ask people, you know, who would you like to look after your children if you've both passed away? And sometimes the woman starts to cry.
Imagine.
Because it's very emotional and they can imagine that situation, and it's so upsetting that I've now created this sort of raw nerve that they don't want to deal with, and they don't want to think about it because sometimes off or on screen or in the meeting they'll start to argue. Well, I'm not letting them go to your sister. Well, actually your brother's a pain in the neck because he would let them go out late at night, and then you get all this absolute stuff, you know, going on. So what I do when I meet people for the first time, I don't ask them in that way. I give them an idea by way of a summary of the sorts of things they're going to have to discuss between themselves before we speak.
Much better.
I'll tell you what, that links nicely with the question. There's a question that says, any suggestions on the best way to raise the conversation with love?
I love that question. I love that question. Well, if that questioner would like to send me a private email, I will send him or her the summary at no obligation. And please just say who you are. I ask the question and I will basically make sure they've got a copy of that summary. That summary will say, these are the things that you have to consider. Have that conversation with your husband or your wife when you're relaxed. You know, what would happen if? What would happen?
I'll tell you what we'll do, Sue, is there might be other people on the call tonight that didn't ask the question but would value that. So perhaps just for the people that have joined this evening.
We can get that summary out. Absolutely.
We'll have the log of who joined us this evening. We'll send a copy of that to each.
Yeah.
And even if people have already got a will in place, it might be something that it might just prompt some thought. But if you could send that through, we'll send it to
I certainly will.
I mean,
this goes out with every introductory letter because I'll say, before we have our meeting, it's going to save you a lot of time. If I'm asking you, you know, who in your family is sort of administratively sort of capable of looking.
It's bonkers not to have a will.
And they'll start thinking like that. There's no excuse for not having a will.
No, so it's just nuts, isn't it? It's bonkers.
All you're doing is giving your family a total headache.
And one thing I would say, just from listening as well, a lot of the meetings are here in the office, so I'm busy with my work while listening, one ear in as such. And Sue makes such a nice environment for people to come and talk about these things because they're not comfortable. No one likes talking about
horrible subject,
but you can do it in such a kind way, and I do think you really come across nicely there.
Super.
That's good. I'll tell you what, I quite like the phrase financial predators.
We love that phrase. Well, they are, aren't they? I mean, there are other financial predators. One of the things I never mention, because we've got such successful clients, is bankruptcy. A properly constructed will would, in fact, protect your assets against bankruptcy. Things like that. There are other predators I haven't listed, but divorce is a killer. We all know someone, and their opening words to me will be, because I have to ask people what assets they've got, what about their pensions, things like that. And then they'll go, well, I've been through a messy divorce and I'm only worth half what I was a few years ago. You know, divorce is a crippler when it comes to wills and inheritances. So very, very important from that point of view.
So I found a bit of positivity. Well, I didn't really when you said we're at the end of our life, Sue. That was really nice.
Sorry about that. Well, I'm not at the end. I'm in the third
trimester. Polite way of saying we're all going to drop off our perch at some point.
But the thing is, I think because of the topic, I think trying to put some lightness into it does help. If you become pretty morose and deep and dark quite quickly. And I guess what Eponine was saying about that, trying to create the right environment where you can have that grown-up conversation, it's very serious, but also not making it kind of too morbid, because we all know the reason why you've got to create a will, but it's kind of trying to walk that fairly kind of tight balance.
It's an interesting one, isn't it? What they say, the two things in life are certain: death and taxes. And
absolutely,
a will and good tax planning, you can try and, once you can't mitigate death, you can at least mitigate your taxes.
Well, I can with added help. I can mitigate most of it. I can't make you live forever. But the other thing is that one of the things people ask me is, because if they're going to do like a few trusts and things, we're talking about a reasonable amount of money that they're going to pay for a good and well constructed will. But people will say to me, do I have to keep changing this if I move house? Or no, of course not. You are the Eponine Littlejohn that lived at that address on that day when you wrote this will. You can move as many times as you like. Now, what I offer as well is I offer something called a letter of wishes, and slightly less, I won't call them important, but slightly less standard things can go in that letter. Say you collect what Rolex watches and you want...
is that like you can have the piano and that?
Or the piano to the nephew, or as Eponine illustrated to her nieces. I've got granddaughters and grandsons. I would want the granddaughters to have my jewelry, but if the granddaughter particularly likes Nanny's ring that's got a ruby on it, I'll write a little note. Please make sure Isla gets offered this first. You don't have to stick all this. And then if you fall out with Isla because she never visits you, just take that letter and rip it up and start again. And it's nothing to do with your will. You don't have to keep paying money. You can do this.
Sue and Eponine, we've got one more question, then we'll need to finish up because we've just gone over the 8 o'clock. But the last question, and if you could give us a quick answer to it, how relevant is key person cover in the dental pharmacy space?
That is yours, Eponine.
It is so important. So we did a webinar a number of months ago all about how to protect your business, and key person cover was one of my top points there. You can protect your life, but you can also protect serious illness and the income generated by a key person. And I think it's such an undersold product. And this can provide a bit of cash if, for whatever reason, a key person in the business wasn't able to fulfill their duties because of serious illness, or if they were to pass away. And a lot of the structure we see as well is not only having key person cover on the business owners, but having it on the practice managers as well, who are in there day to day, who you're really going to feel the effects. So it's definitely something that's worth a conversation if you're a business owner.
Yeah.
Brilliant. Lovely. Thank you very much indeed,
really
Sue and Eponine. That was really good. It was fabulous. If you could whiz through to us that document,
I will
we'll make sure we'll send it out to everybody who joined us. But no, thank you very much indeed. Really enjoyed that. Very good.
Thank you both.
Thank you.
Make your will.
Absolutely.
Thanks a lot.
Thanks a lot, everybody. Thanks for joining us.
Cheers, guys. Thank you.
Cheers. Thank you.
Bye.
Cheers.